You're retired from actively managing money, but you keep an eye on everything that's going on. Jay Powell today said the U.S. economy is in, quote, a really good place. Do you agree or disagree?
It's hard to argue with the truth. It is in a really good place when you look at all the traditional metrics, whether it's, GDP growth, inflation closer to target, unemployment, incredibly low. The economy is in a good place from a cyclical perspective. Where I might push back on that, and this is my hobby horse, as you know, is that I think that income inequality is a big black mark on our economy, but that's a more structural phenomena as opposed to a cyclical phenomenon. Cyclically, I have to agree with him.
Well, you've made the point that partly comes out of monetary policy and the fact that monetary policy was the only game in town coming out of the recovery. So where is the Fed now, and what policies should they be following?
I think that the Fed, first and foremost, should pat itself on the back that it was able to do what the textbook said they couldn't do, which is to get us out of the liquidity trap that we went into following the financial crisis without really any meaningful help from fiscal policy. So I think that the Fed should take a huge amount of justified credit for the fact that we're, in a 10th year of an economic expansion, and it was all them in the first 5 years. So that's a positive. From the other side of the coin is I think that the Fed should appreciate the political environment that they're working in, that income inequality, a byproduct of being the only game in town for monetary policy, really matters politically, and I think they need to be very sensitive to that, and in turn less religious about the inflation target. And again, I think they are doing that, and I love the fact that they're consistently pounding the table that our inflation target is not a ceiling, that we have symmetry around that target. So I really don't have anything to complain about with the Fed.
Yeah. All right. Well,
I don't like the fact that the Fed was the only game in town 10 years ago coming out of the financial crisis, but they're becoming less the only game in town, and I think that's a good thing for society.
Well, they're not the only game in town now because we have a lot of fiscal policy, a lot of fiscal stimulus. Is that a good thing at a time when the economy is growing at a relatively strong pace?
I'm ecstatic about the return of fiscal policy as an active tool of macro management. The timing of it was miserable. I mean, we should have had fiscal policy robustly expansionary early in the recovery. It was strictly a political decision on the part of the Trump administration to go Keynesian in the 9th year of an economic expansion. So I don't think it makes sense to do it that way. I think it's giving us, a grand experiment in running a hot economy. Janet Yellen talked about, the benefits of running a hot economy. We're running a hot economy on the back of fiscal policy. So I'm not against it. But the big thing for me is that fiscal policy be ready politically as well as economically to be used in the next economic downturn. I think as I look out longer term, the biggest risk I see to the fabric of our democracy is if we have to fight the next recession with monetary policy alone. Because the consequences of having done it last time are not good. It's polarized our society.
We've only got about 30 seconds left. You've heard both sides here today on the idea of trade and tariffs. Do you worry about where we are?
I don't think it's a productive game for the United States to be engaged in. So I'm in the school of thought that I wish Mr. Trump wasn't doing this. But at the same time, I don't think the consequences are going to be a disaster.